Hey friends, welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, my name's Brina. Welcome to episode number 3 of my new makeup and murder series. Last week we talked about the massacre on the Investor, and the story was pretty wild. I still don't really know who I believe did it for sure, but today's story is even wilder. Today we're going to be talking about a woman by the name of Betty Lou Beets, aka the Black Widow of Texas. So I'm sure you can get a little bit of an inclination of what's going to happen in today's story, but let's get on with it. So Betty Lou was born on March 12th, 1937 in Roxborough, North Carolina. She was the second of 4 children to Margaret Louise and James Garland Dunavant. Her parents were tobacco farmers and they were also alcoholics. At the age of 3 years old, Betty Lou got the measles and she got a severe ear infection from this that caused her to go deaf. She never received any hearing aids or any kind of special training on how to deal with her hearing disability. She also suffered from a speech problem because of her hearing disability. And because of this, she was bullied a lot in school. And also because of her hearing disability, she wasn't able to hear the teachers. So therefore, she never really did very well in school. When she was 5 years old, the family moved from Roxborough, North Carolina to Hampton, Virginia, where her father became a mechanist at the Langley Research Center, and this job was definitely a step up from being tobacco farmers, and the family started having a little bit more money coming in, so it seemed to be a positive thing for the Dunavants. But around this time, Betty Lou would claim that her father sexually abused her. And she also would say that throughout the rest of her early childhood years, she was sexually abused by many other people who were close to the family. And then when Betty Lou was 12, life got a lot more difficult for her after her mother was institutionalized after suffering a psychotic break. She was hallucinating and became hysterical. After her mother was institutionalized, Betty Lou had to drop out of school to stay home and take care of her younger brother and sister. By the time Betty was 15, she was fed up with her life and looking for a way out, and supposedly her mom set her up with 19-year-old Robert Franklin Branson. I'm not positive that this was a setup from her mentally ill mother, but either way, Betty Lou was very excited to get married for the very first time and move out, and she was just very much looking for any kind of independence she could find at this point. Within the first year of the couple's marriage, they welcomed their very first daughter, but things were not going well for the couple and they separated. And then Betty Lou attempted suicide, and at this point, Robert came back to her, and they would go on to have 5 more children together, and they were married for a total of 17 years. I mean, it's a pretty long time, especially when you consider what's to come in Betty Lou's life. At some point in the marriage, Betty Lou began becoming resentful of Robert for them getting married when she was such a young child, because let's face it, 15-year-old, she was a child. She was really lacking that sense of freedom that I talked about earlier, which I suspect is why she married Robert to begin with. So Betty began going out on her own at night. She started drinking more and frequenting bars a lot more. And as a result of this, she started meeting other men who she enjoyed flirting with. And Robert was not blind to everything that was going on in his wife's nightlife. Although Robert was definitely no angel in this marriage either. Betty Lou would later say that Robert was a very abusive man. And in 1969, Robert became extremely fed up with Betty Lou's behavior and he left her for good this time. So after Robert left, a already very fragile Betty Lou spiraled downhill even more, and she basically became an alcoholic. She would frequent the bars even more often than she had in the past. She got full custody of the kids, and she says that Robert was not helping support them financially. The amount of money that he was giving her was not enough to support the 6 kids that they had together. She says that the money she got from the welfare systems was also an inadequate amount, so she turned to stripping and bartending to help support herself and her children. And as you can imagine, this would leave her kids home alone, because if you can't afford anything and you can't afford a babysitter, what else are you going to do with your kids? So I can only imagine that the oldest children basically became the parents to the younger ones, which is just a sad situation. Betty just did not handle being single, not having that companionship of a man around very well. So a whopping year after Robert left her, in July of 1970, Betty married husband number 2, Billy York Lane. Once again, she would claim that this was an abusive relationship. And I'm not saying claim as in like I don't believe her. I'm just saying claim as in we weren't there, so nobody truly knows what went on behind closed doors. But I'm gonna guess that these men all really were abusive. She grew up with an abusive alcoholic father, and if that's what you know, that's what you know. Especially being married for the first time at such a young age. Just 1 month into her marriage to Billy York, he began hitting her and throwing her around when they would get into arguments. And after 3 months of marriage, Betty Lou took out a restraining order on Billy and then divorced him 2 months later. After the divorce, Billy was not happy. He began stalking her, and he very much enjoyed waiting about a block down the road from her house. On January 17th of 1992, Billy's stalking became more aggressive, and he followed her into her home when she got home, obviously. And he began beating her. He broke her nose, and Betty Lou just was not having this anymore, so she shot him in the stomach. Obviously, this stopped Billy Lane from beating her anymore, but this resulted in Betty Lou being charged with assault with intention to commit murder with malice. Let me just say this makeup is coming out way more dramatic than I had intended for it to, so... oh well. Days before the two were set to go to trial, Billy decided he was going to drop the charges. He told police that, in fact, Betty Lou was only defending herself when he had threatened her life first. And with him wanting to drop the charges, police couldn't really do anything else, so they just had to drop the charges. The charges were then dropped to a misdemeanor aggravated assault. And apparently, while all this trial stuff was happening, the two rekindled their relationship because they remarried that same year, 1972. But this marriage was extremely short-lived as the couple divorced about a month later. Within about a year of divorcing Billy York Lane, Betty Lou once again moves on very quickly. At 36 years old, Betty Lou begins dating Ronnie Threlcold. And in 1978, he would become husband number 4. Because she married Billy twice, so technically he's husband 2 and 3. Apparently, the couple shared a few blissful years before, once again, Betty Lou became the victim of domestic violence. When they would get into heated arguments, Ronnie would begin pushing Betty Lou around, and Ronnie also started showing an interest in her 2 older daughters. Sounds to me like Ronnie's got to go, but not in the way Betty Lou is thinking. One day, Betty Lou walks into the kitchen where she finds Ronnie talking to one of her daughters, and she She sees this as like a suspicious thing. He seems very much interested in her. Way too interested in her for it to be his stepdaughter. And rightfully so, Betty Lou freaks out. But what she does next is not something I would do. She attempts to run him over with his own car. So she gets in the car and drives at him, but luckily Ronnie was able to jump out of the way before she struck him. He was very scared, so Ronnie just left, never pressed any charges. I'm guessing that he definitely had some bad intentions when he was talking to her daughter. Otherwise, I would have definitely pressed charges if I was him, because she's just cray-cray. And the thing that I'm wondering is, do you think that these other men knew of Betty Lou's history with her exes, or do you think that they all just saw her as this very pretty, petite, young blonde woman who showed them a lot of attention? So we're on husband number 4. Do you think that she told him, look, I've been married 3 times before, or she just tells husbands about her first husband who she has the kids with? I'm really curious about that. Because, like, clearly these men cannot be very smart going into a marriage with a woman who's been married so many times. Clearly she is the common denominator in these relationships that are not ending well. Whatever the case may be with that, Betty Lou ends up divorced for the 4th time. And now Betty is 42 years old and she gets arrested for public lewdness and spends 30 days in jail. I'm not really sure what happened here, but apparently she was arrested at one of the topless bars, clubs, bars, whatever, that she worked at. So let's just say this is not a good year for Betty Lou. Her whole life has basically just been a series of not a good year for Betty Lou. Once again, following in her old patterns, within the next year, Betty Lou meets husband number 5. In 1979, she marries Doyle Wayne Barker. Once again, the couple seemingly shared a few happy months, but then she began confiding in her daughter Shirley, who at this point has become a very big confidant to Betty Lou, and she fills her in that, once again, her husband is beating her. So Shirley advises her mom to leave Doyle, like any normal daughter would do. But Betty Lou says she cannot leave Doyle because he owns their trailer. If they get divorced, he's going to get the trailer and she won't have a place to live. So Betty Lou tells Shirley there's only one way out of this marriage. And Doyle Wayne would never be seen or heard from again. Supposedly the two got divorced, but I don't know if I believe that. He just vanishes, disappears. Less than a year after Doyle disappears, Betty Lou has moved on to husband number 6. In August of 1982, she marries Jimmy Don Beets. And this is when she becomes Betty Lou Beets. This has also got me curious. I was thinking about this while I was researching this crazy wild story. Do you think that she changed her name every time she got married? Because my god, like, it's a whole thing. It's not extremely cheap to change your name. Like, you have to pay fees to have your name legally changed. Plus then, like, everything else that goes along with it. I'm curious. Clearly she took her 6th husband's last name, so did she take every other husband's last name also? And this marriage was actually a really good one, surprisingly. Jimmy Don was a retired firefighter. The couple was married for about a year, and it was seemingly a very happy marriage. Betty Lou asked Jimmy to build her a wishing well in the front yard. She had told him, like, it'll symbol our relationship. You build this for me, and it'll be this amazing thing. It'll symbolize my wishes that this will be finally my only successful marriage. So Jimmy Don, being the good man that he is, complies and builds her this wishing well. Well, at some point in 1983, Betty Lou gets in her mind that maybe this marriage isn't so good after all. Maybe he's just like every other man that I've ever married or been with, and he'll eventually start beating me as well. So Betty Lou gets an idea to forge some signatures and takes out a life insurance policy on Jimmy. And understandably, when he finds this out, he's very angry. And Betty Lou is apologetic, and she tells him she's so sorry, I'll never do anything like that again. He forgives her, and the couple goes on living a normal life. At least that's what Jimmy thinks. But little does he know, Betty has it in her mind that the only way to keep him from beating her is to make him disappear as well. On August 6th of 1983, just about a year after the couple got married, Betty Lou called the police to report her husband, Jimmy Don Beets, missing. She claimed that he went night fishing the night before and never came home. So police think that he must be on the lake somewhere. So they go out and start searching. On August 12th, 6 days after she reports him missing, his boat washes ashore near the Redwood Beach Marina, and in the boat, police find his nitroglycerin pills as well as a lonely life jacket with no signs of Jimmy Don on board. So they conclude that Jimmy must have had a heart attack or a heart episode of some sort, because that's what the nitroglycerin pills were for. They're a heart medication. And they began scouring the lake looking for his body. And they attempt this search for Jimmy Don's body for about 3 weeks before concluding that he must have drowned, and they just were unable to find him. Betty, unaware of the fact that when a body is not discovered, that it takes 7 years for them to be declared legally dead. So she begins her attempts to collect his life insurance policy, and she goes to the fire department to find out what pension benefits she would be getting from him, being the wife of a now seemingly dead, retired firefighter. And police find this suspicious, but they don't have anything to go on, so they are unable to arrest Betty. So not only is she trying to get life insurance money on him immediately after his disappearance, as well as his pension, she also apparently burned down Jimmy's lake house, which just adds even more fuel to the fire. I'm really bad at these analogies. I always say an analogy that's about the horrible thing that I'm talking about. So clearly the police begin suspecting Betty Lou even more, but once again, they have no evidence to go on. There's no body, no murder weapon, no evidence whatsoever. All they have to go on is a missing man and his boat that washed ashore. 2 years go by, and Betty is living her best life in her trailer that she got in the divorce of her 5th husband. What was his name? Doyle, that's right. So Betty's still living in this trailer that she lived in with Doyle and thinks that everything is just hunky-dory. She's in the clear. Her last 2 husbands have disappeared, but it's okay because nobody suspects her. Well, wrong, Betty Lou, you are wrong. Police get a tip from a confidential informant saying that there's more to the disappearance of Jimmy Don than meets the eye. You need to go look into Betty further and search her property. So, almost 2 full years after the disappearance of her 6th and final husband, Jimmy Don Beets, police get a search warrant to search her property. And what do they find, you ask? Well, under the wishing well that Jimmy Don built for her as a symbol of their love and their perfect relationship that they were going to be living, they find Jimmy Don's bullet-ridden body. But that's not it. Police keep searching the property, and under a garden shed in the backyard, they find another body. And police aren't sure who it is at this point, but as we know, it is husband number 5, Doyle Wayne Barker. So on June 8th, 1985, Betty Lou is arrested and charged with capital murder. But this is far from the end of the story, okay? It's determined that Jimmy Don had a gunshot wound to the head and torso, and Doyle Wayne Barker had 3 gunshot wounds to his head. Also, during the search of Betty Lou's property, police find a .38 caliber pistol, which is later determined to be the gun that killed both of her last husbands. It later comes out that Betty Lou shot Doyle Wayne Barker 3 times in his head while he slept. So I don't think you can really use a self-defense claim there. When she goes to court on July 11th, 1985, which I'm having a hard time believing. Like, just a month after she got arrested, she's already being tried? Holy cow. That's crazy. Because we all know how long it takes for justice to happen in our country today. But anyways, apparently on July 11th, 1985, her trial for capital murder and remuneration begins. So remuneration means like something about money, because that's what they think that the motive is in both of the murders is money. I mean, they're not far off on that, so. And 3 of her kids would testify against her in court. 2 of them were her children that she used to point the finger at as her defense. She said her daughter Shirley killed Doyle Wayne Barker and her son Robbie killed her 6th husband, Jimmy Don Beets. But her children have a very different story. Shirley would testify that in October of 1981, her mother came to her with this plan to kill Doyle. Like I said, Shirley told her to leave him. If he's abusing you, just leave him. And as we all know, she did not. So after Betty Lou killed her 5th husband, she enlisted the help of her daughter Shirley to bury his body in the backyard. And then they later built the garden shed over top to further conceal the body. And obviously Shirley was very conflicted. She knew what her mother did was not right, but this is her mom, and she just did not feel comfortable turning her into authorities. I do not know who the confidential informant is. They're confidential for a reason, so we could suspect that it's Shirley, but I don't believe it was her. Maybe it was Robbie. I don't really know. Maybe it was one of her other kids. Maybe it was a neighbor. Who knows? Shirley would later say that when her mom was getting arrested, one of her sisters called her to tell her, "You need to come to my house now." And she said, "Okay, I'll be there in a minute." And she said, "No, right now." And she was heading to the bathroom before she left for her sister's house when the phone rang again, and her sister said, "You need to get here now. The police are on their way to arrest you for the murder of Doyle Wayne Barker." Their mom had completely given the children up, saying that they were the sole murderers of her husband. She had absolutely nothing to do with it, but she didn't want to turn her kids in. As far as I can tell, no charges were ever brought against Shirley or Robbie. And Robbie's story is that his mother told him the day before she called to report Jimmy Don missing, she had told him to leave the house because she intended on killing Jimmy Don. At the time of Jimmy Don's death, Betty's youngest son, Robbie, was living with his mother and Jimmy. And he says that the day before she called police, he told her to leave the house because she intended on killing Jimmy. So Robbie complied and left the house. And when he came back about 2 hours later, he saw Jimmy Don laying dead on the floor. And Betty Lou was preparing to dispose of his body. So she ordered her son to go and dig the hole in the wishing well so they could bury him there. The pair then planted Jimmy's nitroglycerin pills in the boat, and Robbie admits to ditching the boat in the lake. And Betty Lou's side of the story is that Robbie and Jimmy had a very toxic relationship and the two did not get along whatsoever. And on the day of Jimmy's death, Robbie came home stating that he had quit his job, which enraged Jimmy, who then began beating on Robbie and the two began fighting. And Betty Lou, being a petite woman, could not break up the fight, which resulted in Robbie shooting Jimmy dead. And she says that she could not go to police at the time because this was her son. She loves him. She couldn't allow him to go to prison for the rest of his life for murdering his abusive stepfather. This is according to Betty. She also claims that she was very crushed by Jimmy's death and that she laid there beside him as he died and held his body. I don't buy it. I don't buy any of it. I don't buy her sob stories. I think she is a psychopath. Robbie would also say that after his mom killed Jimmy Don, that he should never tell anybody about what happened that day, and that if anyone were to ever find out, she would take full blame and he would not be implicated in the murder whatsoever. After a very short trial on October 11th, just 3 months after the trial began, Betty Lou was found guilty of murdering husband number 6, Jimmy Don Beets. Following the verdict, Betty Lou collapsed and had to spend the night in the hospital. Apparently, she thought that her manipulative ways would work on the jury, and she was very overwhelmed when it did not. 3 days after her conviction, Betty Lou was given her sentence, and she was sentenced to death by lethal injection. Following an automatic appeal, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals overturned the conviction, saying that the pension benefits were not the same as remuneration. I'll put the definition of that somewhere on the screen. I don't really understand that very well, but they overturned this verdict, or they overturned the sentence of whatever. They overturned it, whatever they overturned it. But then something else happened and the conviction was back on, the death sentence was back on. I don't know. I don't understand all that court stuff. And after 10 years of appeals, Betty Lou's sentence was carried out on February 24th of 2000 at 6:18 p.m. At the time, she was only the second woman and the oldest person to be put to death by lethal injection since the state had resumed executions. Now, this is probably going to be a very controversial thing for me to say, but I am a strong supporter of the death penalty, and I fully believe that Betty Lou got what she deserved. She murdered two of her husbands in cold blood. But I only believe the death penalty should be enforced when under two circumstances. The family of the victim has to want that as well, and there has to be a substantial amount of evidence proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, because there are far too many people in our country who have been put to death when they weren't guilty and who are currently on death row, I'm sure, who aren't guilty. So under the right circumstances, yes, I think that the death penalty is very much warranted. And in this case, Betty Lou, I mean, yeah, she may have been a victim of domestic violence and all that other stuff, spousal, rape, whatever, which, like, none of these things were really a thing back then, but weren't really a factor. But Betty Lou did not even come forward with these claims of abuse until many years after her conviction. So if she really was abused, why did she not use that as her defense at all? Granted, I did read that she was convicted before, like, a domestic violence thing had been put in place where you could use that as your defense. But as far as I can tell, domestic violence was never brought up in her case. And she herself had even said that her marriage to Jimmy Don was a good one. But maybe at this point she was just so scorned by her past relationships that she was just over men in general. I told y'all this case was wild. And that there is Betty Lou Beets, the Black Widow of Texas. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about Betty Lou and her 5 husbands, 6 marriages. Also, let me know who you'd like me to talk about next, because there's a very vast world of murderers out there, and sometimes it's hard to pinpoint which one is the right one to talk about. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe before you go. I upload new videos every Wednesday and Saturday, and Saturdays are my makeup and murder days. So definitely hit that subscribe button if you're into makeup or murder or both. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in my next one. Bye!